We are certainly looking deep into the set of issues around Moscow Trump Tower.
But isn't it true that you're supposed to follow and see if there was wrongdoing done and then follow the crime? But here it's like you got your guy and you want to find a crime.
We're also looking at persistent allegations that the Russians have been laundering money through the Trump organization. I don't know that that's true. I don't know that that's true. I don't know that that's true.
He said he's never been to Prague, by the way. That was what the dossier said.
Well,
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, your host. Congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
And glad to have you as my convivial, congenial, amiable, and effervescent audience.
As always.
As we get ready for another day. Focal Point, home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Very glad to have you in the conversation today. A little U2 in the audio teaser at the top there. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. That's the Democrats. We'll talk more about that as the show develops. Now I want to take a few minutes to talk about Zechariah chapter 11 today because it reveals a lot about our political environment today, and we see that the more things change, the more they remain the same. I mean, we tend to think that, well, we're the only people that dealt with these political knuckleheads in office that seem to care only about themselves, only about their image, only about their wealth, that don't care about us, they don't care about the average citizen. They just seem to be preoccupied entirely with other things that maybe serve them, but don't serve us. But I want you to listen to some of the words out of Zechariah chapter 11 because we see that God, through the prophet, was dealing with exactly the same situation that we deal with. And he told Zechariah as a prophet, look, I want you to go and become a shepherd to this flock. They are destined to slaughter because the people that are leading them are leading them to slaughter. That's where they are headed. This is what God says. Those who buy them, describing us as the people of a nation, as sheep that are purchased and then sold for slaughter, those who buy them and slaughter them and go unpunished, and those who sell them say, blessed be the Lord, I have become rich. For their own shepherds have no pity on them. So the politicians, they don't care that things are miserable for the people under their leadership as long as they've got theirs. And they're even sanctimoniously praising God in public. You know, and you've got politicians do it all the time. They'll be out there talking about God. You make them think that they just came right out of church and stepped right into the podium to talk about God. But it's all phony. It's all pretense because their concern is really not about God, God's kingdom, or even God's desire for how they treat their own people. So anyway, Zechariah says in verse 7, I became the shepherd of the flock doomed to be slaughtered by the sheep traders. This is a reference to the politicians. They're called sheep traders. I took two staffs, one I named Favor, the other I named Union. In 1 month, he says, I destroyed the 3 shepherds who were misleading the flock, but I became impatient with them, and they also detested me. In other words, the politicians detested the guy that was trying to tell them the truth about what was going on. They detested me. So I said, I will not be your shepherd. What is it to die? What is to die, let it die. What is to be destroyed, let it be destroyed. Let those who are left devour the flesh of one another. You know, and sometimes you just have to do that. Sometimes you just have to walk away. You've given it your best shot. You've done everything in your power to try to provide leadership and direction and ministry, care, whatever's required. You try to do your dead level best. People will not cooperate with you. And finally you get to the point and you say, well, look, I'm just going to have to step away from this thing. There's nothing I can do. What is to die, let it die. So we have to do that on occasion, just to walk away from it and let what happens, happens. You know, when I got fired from my church, nothing I could do about it, so I just had to walk away. What is to die, let it die. And that thing died. That went to the bottom of the lake faster than a rock. So sometimes you just have to walk away from something, and if it's going to die, you let it die. So anyway, he was given 30 pieces of silver in order to go away. I took the 30 pieces of silver, Zechariah says, and I threw them into the house of the Lord to the potter. This became a prophetic event, remember, because that's what Judas took. He took 30 pieces of silver to betray Christ into the hands of the civil authorities of his day. And that was Zechariah here acting this out as a prophetic typology of what would happen to Christ. And so the staff of favor was broken. They no longer had the favor of God. And then he broke the staff called union, annulling the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. So when things begin to die, one of the things that happens in a culture, it happens in a community, happens in a city, happens in a church, once the spirit of oneness and harmony and union is broken, then division begins to result, and the chasm between the two camps grows wider and wider and wider. So what God says, the last word in Zechariah 11 is a word of condemnation to the politicians that fail to provide leadership that their people need. Remember, the people are helpless because they have to adjust to, they have to live with the decisions and the policies of their politicians, their political leaders. And so that's why there's tremendous vulnerability to be in the place that we are. We have think of what's happened in Venezuela. That was all done to those people. They had no choice in the matter. So God says to this worthless shepherd, misleading the people, thinking about himself, lining his own pockets, woe to my worthless shepherd who deserts the flock. May the sword strike his arm, and his right eye, let his arm be wholly withered, his right eye utterly blinded. So it just shows that God's not a real big fan of politicians who misuse their political power and take advantage of the sheep. One of the things we need to realize in the Old Testament, the term shepherd is primarily used to refer to political leaders, not primarily used to refer to members of the clergy or to pastors. The term shepherds almost always in the Old Testament refers to a political leader because they have the same responsibilities that a shepherd has for the sheep, to protect them from the wolves, to make sure that we have security and we are protected from their ravages so we can live in peace and tranquility. And a responsibility to make sure that they're living in an environment where they can be fed and they can be housed and they can be clothed. So that was the responsibility of politicians in their day as it is in ours. Well, let's go to prayer, and we're going to pray about our politicians here today that have done so much damage to our culture. Lord God Almighty, in Jesus' name, we bring before your throne this day our political leaders, the shepherds of this city and nation. We bring our complaint before you that we have many politicians who do not care for those whose lives are being damaged and destroyed by their policies, who do not protect the young, who do not heal the maimed, and who do not nourish the healthy. Instead, they devour the flesh of the prosperous and healthy. They are worthless shepherds who have no compassion for the flock, who desert them and make themselves rich. They have allowed us to fall into the hands of our neighbors and have crushed our land with their oppression and have destined us for slaughter. We pray that you will severely discipline these worthless shepherds who desert the flock and that you will remove them from office. We pray instead for leaders who will care for and protect and tend the flocks under their care. I pray that we will recognize and honor good shepherds so that we will not detest them or go weary of them and so be left unprotected. We ask you for shepherds who will care for the lost and who will seek the young. May they heal the injured and nourish the healthy. We pray that our leaders will shepherd us with your staff called favor. May your favor be extended over our city and nation, that under your covenant we may find protection and prosperity. Place in their hands the staff called union, that we may know harmony and peace in every home, every church, in every neighborhood, and throughout our land. Amen. All right. Well, let's turn our attention to some content as we begin the program today. Want to mention this kind of in passing, a story I came across late this morning. This is the most expensive new car that's ever been built. It's a Bugatti. Now, you know about Bugattis, right, Rob? Because they made motorcycles, big motorcycle manufacturer. Right? Am I right about that? Didn't they make motorcycles?
I'm not sure.
Mixing this up with somebody else? Anyway, Bugatti is a French sports car brand. It's owned by Volkswagen, by the way. And they have just made a new car that costs $19 million. $19 million. And somebody owns it. Apparently, it is the former chairman of the Volkswagen Group. Apparently, he has added it to his collection of high-end cars. It's called the Bugatti La Voiture Noire. That's French for the black car. And
it sounded good.
It's got 6 tailpipes. It's called a hypercar. It has an 8-liter engine and 16 cylinders and 1,500 horsepower.
Good.
All yours for just $19 million.
They do have motorcycles, by the way, at about $65,000. So
They're Bugatti, the motorcycles?
Yeah, they have some for $65,000.
65 grand.
I guess that's why I didn't know.
Yeah. There you go. Everybody's got an excuse. Yeah. That's maybe the first time in my life where I actually knew more about motorcycles than Rob did. So we'll just memorialize this moment and keep it for a while. All right. Also want to talk about a couple of other religious liberty issues that are out there. You know, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but this Ilhan Omar, she's the one that's in big trouble right now for all these anti-Semitic tweets. In fact, the entire House of Representatives, at Nancy Pelosi's urging, has developed or has written a pro-Israel resolution. And they're all going to vote on that today, and it's a direct rebuke of Representative Ilhan Omar, who is a Somali Muslim. And she has been relentlessly anti-Semitic. And this is what happens. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but this is what happens when you vote for a Muslim. What do you get when you put a Muslim in office? You get somebody who hates the nation of Israel. So if you love the nation of Israel, do not vote for a Muslim to be elevated office. It's in the DNA. The very spirit of Islam carries within it the DNA of this inbuilt hatred for Islam, and that characterizes her. Give you an example. This is one of the skeletons in her closet, Ilhan Omar. This is back when she was in the state legislature in Minnesota. There was a bill that was presented to the Minnesota House that would give life insurance companies the right to deny payouts to beneficiaries whose loved one died while committing an act of terrorism. Because realize, this is in 2017, this was a problem. You'd have terrorists that would take out life insurance policies before they would go on jihad. And then they'd die in jihad, and these insurance companies would have to pay off their loved ones and their families, just like the Palestinian Authority, only we were letting them do it to ourselves. That's why you just cannot indulge the religion of Islam. This kind of stuff happens. She was one of 2 in the Minnesota legislature that voted against that. She voted against that bill. We'll be right back.
By mercy and truth, iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Brazil's newly elected president, Jair Bolsonaro, has committed himself to obliterating regressivism in his country. President Bolsonaro has focused his latest efforts in this ideological battle on ridding Brazil's classrooms and universities of Marxism, feminism, and sexual deviancy indoctrination. On the eve of his inauguration, Bolsonaro tweeted, "One of the goals to get Brazil out of the worst positions in international education rankings is to combat the Marxist rubbish that has spread in the educational institutions." The Brazilian people elected him to do this job, and he's making good on his promises.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Dr. Richard Land, President of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Unfortunately, all too often, if you want a glimpse of the dark and dystopian future ahead of us in America, unless there is another great spiritual awakening, look north to Canada. Once again, this has proven to be all too true. The Supreme Court of British Columbia has ordered that a 14-year-old girl receive testosterone injections without parental consent and over parental objection. The court further decreed that if either of her parents referred to her using female pronouns or called her by her given birth name, they would be charged with family violence. When this young lady was 13, her school counselor encouraged her to identify as a boy, even though she is biologically a girl, and she began taking testosterone injections at 13. Her father objected, believing that her gender dysphoria was more a mental health issue than a biological one, and believed she should wait until she was older before she began to undergo such an irreversible course of medical treatment. The court ruled that the 14-year-old daughter was free to begin the treatments and continue them. The father has appealed to the Canadian Supreme Court, but while the case is on appeal, his 14-year-old daughter has embarked on her hormone treatments and they continue. If you think that this is not where the LGBTQ community of activists and radicals want to take America, then you are a human ostrich with your head buried in the sand. This is the future, unless we as Christians stand up and call upon God to send a great revival. Join me in praying for revival, praying for spiritual awakening, praying for spiritual reformation. Pray that God intervenes to save us from this dark future. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio, home of the fastest 60 minutes in American media. Now, wanted to close the loop on this Ilhan Omar. She's the one that's going to be rebuked today by the entire House of Representatives because she hates Israel and she tweets out nasty tweets about Israel that are slanderous and are simply not true. And she's been rebuked enough individually by Democrat legislators. They finally just had it up to here and said, we've got to make sure that we go on record that we do not support what this woman is saying about Israel. Now, this is the problem that they've got. They've opened their gates so wide they just simply have no standards anymore for what it means to be a Democrat. So you get an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who's proposed an environmental platform and agenda that will cost $93 billion, cost every man, woman, and child in this country $600,000 to implement that. And then we find out today, by the way, breaking news, that her chief of staff diverted $2 million in campaign funds to his own private companies. That's socialism on steroids. In socialism, it's the elite that get all the pork, and the ordinary people like you and me, they get nothing. Well, that's exactly what socialism is all about. The elites, the people in the farmhouse, like in George Orwell's Animal Farm, the people in the farmhouse, they're eating high on the hog. The pigs out in the barnyard, they got nothing. And so this is what happened with Alexandria Cortez's own chief of staff. $2 million he put in his own pocket. And so there's an investigation going on with that, and there's liable to be something happening there. So that's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, some of the problems she's dealing with. Well, let's get back to this Ilhan Omar, who is a Somali Muslim. I want to close the loop on this again. Let's go back to this thing I was talking about right before the break. In 2017, when she was in the Minnesota House of Representatives, there was an issue at that time. And remember, Minnesota is one of the sources of jihad. In fact, let me talk about that first before we go back and close the loop on this. The district that Ilhan Omar represents is the terrorist recruitment capital of the United States. Fox News says more men and boys from a Somali American community in Minneapolis have joined or attempted to join a foreign terrorist organization over the last 12 years than any other jurisdiction in the country. They're part of Representative Omar's 5th congressional district in Minnesota. FBI has 45 recorded instances of Somalis from that community leaving the country to join radical Islamic terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab or ISIS. In 2018 alone, Fox reported, a dozen more had been arrested with the intention of leaving to support ISIS. I say, well, let them go, just don't let them back in. That's the issue we're dealing with this Hoda Muthana. She's the ISIS bride everybody's talking about. I'm going to talk about her in a second. She's not a citizen, does not deserve to get back into the States. Well, let's go back to the skeleton that crawled out of Ilhan Omar's closet, this insurance bill that was before the House in 2017. And you get an idea of why this was necessary. If her district's the leading recruitment capital in the country for Islamic jihad, then you can understand why Minnesota's having to deal with this issue. So they were having an issue. These insurance companies, these jihadis were taking out insurance policies, and then they were going out and killing themselves in battle, for Muhammad. And so these big payouts, I mean, they take these huge life insurance policies out right before they went into a kamikaze mission. And so these insurance companies now were paying these huge payouts to these families who had a jihadist in their family take out an insurance policy with them as the beneficiary. So it's no different than what you had going on with the Palestinians, only here it was insurance company money that was going to pay off these jihadis. Now, when that bill was brought before the House of Representatives in Minnesota, there were 129. Notice how carefully I said the word 100. There were 129 people who voted.
Debbie noticed how carefully you said that.
Oh, I wonder.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. So anyway, 129 people voted, or representatives voted on this bill, and 127 of them voted for it. That said, it's not right that our insurance companies should be hijacked like this and their resources bled off to fund Islamic jihad. That's not right. And only 2 voted against that bill, and one of them was this Ilhan Omar. So she is so dedicated to the cause of jihad, she wanted American insurance companies to continue to be on the hook for these huge payouts to people who killed Americans in the name of Allah and in the name of Muhammad. So that's from Ilhan Omar. That's the latest with her. Now, let's see if I had some. Oh, let me talk about this ISIS bride. I've got a column up, by the way, on this ISIS bride. You can get it at afa.net. You may have to go and find my name there and look up the columns that I've written, because this was a week ago, I think we put this up. But I wrote a column on the thesis that this woman, this Hoda Muthana, she's called the ISIS bride in the news. And in my point of view, from a constitutional standpoint, she is neither a citizen. Well, she's not a citizen. I mean, that's it. She's just not a citizen of the United States. Now, that's the real debate right now. Our State Department says she's not a citizen. She's not going to be allowed back in the United States. And that's what my column is about, whether she is, in fact, a citizen of the United States. Now, the 14th Amendment is what her supporters and her attorney are citing as proof that she is a citizen because she was born in the United States of America. And here I'm going to talk about the whole concept of birthright citizenship that, in my judgment, has constitutionally has just been completely distorted, completely mangled, completely misconstrued, and given birth to this whole birth tourism trade, where pregnant women from China, I mean, they've got an entire industry over there that books hotels, that books flights, that arranges for obstetricians to deliver the baby just so the baby can be born on American soil and be christened an American citizen. It's just a regular enterprise in the country of China, all based, what I believe, is the severe misunderstanding of the 14th Amendment. Now, remember, the 14th Amendment was passed after the Civil War. Now, this was in the wake of the Civil War. They had to deal with the issue of slavery. So, Amendment 13 made slavery illegal in the United States. Involuntary servitude is unconstitutional and illegal in the United States of America, with one exception. Did you know that? Do you know the 13th Amendment says there's one form of slavery that is still legal in the United States? Most people don't know this. I'd be willing to bet you didn't know this until just now. There is a form of slavery or involuntary servitude that is perfectly constitutional and perfectly legal in the United States of America. Now, let me read you the exact words of the 13th Amendment. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, listen to this, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So you can still have slavery, involuntary servitude for inmates that have had their day in court, had an opportunity to be represented by counsel. They've been judged by a jury of their peers. They've faced their accusers in open court. The evidence has been found overwhelmingly against them. They have convicted of the crime, sent to prison, and there they can be subjected to involuntary servitude, whether it's making license plates, working on a chain gang, cleaning up litter, perfectly permissible, explicitly constitutional according to the 13th Amendment. All right, now to the 14th Amendment. Again, this 13th Amendment eliminates slavery in the United States. 14th Amendment says former slaves are from this point forward, what am I trying to say? From henceforth will be considered as American citizens. This is the way it reads. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Don't forget that phrase. That's going to be absolutely critical. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So 14th Amendment says if you're born or naturalized in the United States, you are a citizen of the United States with one exception. If you are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, you are not a citizen just because you were born here. Now, the example that's given in the case of this Hoda Muthana is that her father was a diplomat. And virtually from the time this amendment was passed, the children of diplomats were not considered American citizens just because they were born here. Now, here's the kicker. Everybody thinks, well, there must be something in the Constitution that says you're a citizen if you're born here unless you're the child of a diplomat. The word diplomat's not in the Constitution anywhere. Well, certainly not in the 14th Amendment. So it doesn't say that they're not citizens because they were children of diplomats. They are not citizens because they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Why? Because they are citizens of a foreign country. So in other words, if the parents of the child who's born here if they are citizens of another country, maybe because they're a diplomat, maybe because they're here on vacation, maybe because they're here trying to take advantage of these moronic judicial decrees that have been handed down. If just because they're born here does not make them a citizen if their parents are citizens of another nation and therefore subject ultimately to the jurisdiction of that nation. So you are not a citizen if you are born in the United States unless your parents are citizens of the United States or legal residents at the least. So just because you were born here does not make you a citizen unless your parents were citizens and therefore subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. If your parents are not citizens, they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That's why we can deport them. That's why we can throw them out of the country, because they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. They're not citizens. So just remember that. Subject to the jurisdiction, it's clear, means if the child's parents are citizens of a foreign country, their children, just because they're born here, are not citizens. So that's the child of every illegal alien. Every illegal alien that gives birth to a child on U.S. soil has not given birth to a U.S. citizen. That's bogus. That's because of judicial activism. The reasoning is clear, and the debate about the 14th Amendment make this clear. Well, let's apply this just very quickly to this case of this Hoda Muthana, the ISIS bride. Now, her circumstances, she left Alabama 4 years ago when she was 19 to go to Syria to fight alongside the warriors of the caliphate to give them aid and comfort. Married 4 different jihadis. They all got killed in battle. Fortunately, none of them had taken out life insurance policies with American companies in the process. She conceived a child with one of them. Now she wants to come back home. And her attorneys are arguing that she is a United States citizen. Well, her father was a diplomat from Yemen, but they're arguing that he was fired as a diplomat about 30 days before she was born. And therefore, that shouldn't be held against her. She should be treated as a citizen of the United States. But her father was still a citizen of Yemen. He hadn't become a naturalized citizen in the process, hadn't become an American citizen in the process. So she was the daughter of somebody who constitutionally was not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. He was subject to the jurisdiction of Yemen. That's why Yemen could fire him. That's why Yemen could order him to come home, and he would have to come home because he was subject to the jurisdiction of Yemen. So she was not a U.S. citizen at birth, regardless of when her father was fired as a diplomat. So don't think, when you hear about birthright citizen, don't think that there's something in the Constitution about diplomats being excluded. It's not diplomats that are excluded. It's anybody who is not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, but subject rather to a foreign jurisdiction. So that's from a constitutional standpoint. Again, I'm not talking about what these renegade judges may have done with this. She is not a citizen of the United States. And if she were to be admitted back into the country, the first thing that ought to happen to her is she ought to be tried for treason, which is the only crime that's listed in the United States Constitution. Here's the definition of treason against the United States: levying war against them, states plural, 50 states, the United States, levying war against them, the United States plural, or adhering to their enemies by giving them aid and comfort. Well, she violated both of those. She was part of levying war against U.S. troops in Syria. She was giving them aid and comfort by marrying their jihadi warriors, by giving them children, sons of the caliphate. Now remember that it is a capital crime. If you are guilty of treason, you die. We had that happen with the Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, 1953. They gave away nuclear secrets to the USSR. They died for their trouble for treason. So we should not open our doors to her anyway, but she's not entitled to come back because she's not a citizen. If they do let her in, try her for treason as soon as she steps off the plane.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
This is my second day of detailing the Medicare for All Act of 2019. After the bill makes its false claim about being health insurance that protects against costs, it goes on to a short list of promises. Just like Obamacare, the promises are written near the top in large, bold letters where everyone can read them. The list includes promises like universal coverage and freedom of choice, non-discrimination and comprehensive benefits, and no cost sharing. So most people will believe that everyone's covered, you can go anywhere, a comprehensive list of benefits are provided, and you don't even have to pull out your pocketbook. What could possibly be wrong with this? Tune in tomorrow.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Culture is a product of us being placed in a particular location, and it is God's desire that his light bearers would culture or cultivate a particular area.
Join Abraham Hamilton III as he presents the biblical case for cultural engagement. It's a powerful video resource from the American Family Association's Cultural Institute series.
You and I create the culture of our country.
Visit afastore.net.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you sign up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare, and MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program. It's been around for 25 years. They have more than 400,000 members now around the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $2 billion of each other's medical bills, so they could help share your needs too. And best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is around $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money every month. So if you think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have much to offer, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. There's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Let me get to one other thing. I want to just read one other thing from the debate about the 14th Amendment to make it very clear. Even in the debate, the framers of the 14th Amendment did not intend for this amendment, this citizenship grant, to include citizens, to children of those who are not citizens of the United States. I've got the wording here in my column. Representative John Bingham of Ohio was the father of the 14th Amendment, and this is the guy that wrote it, that sponsored it. He explained the language of the amendment like this, quote, "Every human being born within the jurisdiction of the United States," catch this, "of parents not owing allegiance to any foreign sovereignty is a natural-born citizen." So this is the guy that wrote the 14th Amendment, saying if the parents of the child owe their allegiance to a foreign sovereignty, then their children are not citizens by birth. So we have got to get back to this. I mean, this wrong-headed interpretation or application of this amendment has just done tremendous damage to our social fabric. It's made good immigration policy virtually impossible right now in the United States. Now, we're always on the hunt for winnable war moments, and we've got one from, I believe, West Virginia. This is our Read report for the day. This is a way cool story if you haven't seen it. Jeff?
Yeah, and just by the way, this Read report is brought to you, been sponsored by the Boy to Man book.
The Boy to Man.
Written by Brian Fisher. No, actually, there was a massive church fire in West Virginia. I believe it was Grandview, West Virginia. In the middle of the night, about 1 o'clock, the police were called to this fire, and it was already burning quite a bit. It got so, the flames got so big that they actually had to back out and go back to the street and try and regain. Yes, the heat was incredible. Well, the next morning they're going through the rubble, and to the amazement of the firemen and the people going through the place, not one Bible was burned. And the firemen posted this on their page, that's almost impossible with those kind of heats, that kind of heat and intense heat that was going on there, that anything combustible should have burst into flame. I mean, not one Bible and not one cross was damaged. Everything else was a wreck.
Wow. Somebody watching over them and protecting them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
God protecting his word and protecting the symbol of the sacrifice that saved the world.
Yeah, and actually I've experienced this working with Friendships and Disaster Relief, especially when we went through the aftermath of Hurricane Ike. I mean, the flooding there was terrible, and you saw a lot of, you could walk into a house and see exactly how high the water had gone because it leaves sludge and mold and garbage, and there was numerous places that we went to where they'd have a picture of Jesus or scripture posted on the wall, and it was as if the water went around it. It had to be underwater, but it was untouched.
Wow, because it was below the line where the water hit the high water mark, below that, but untouched.
And our very own John Riley can verify that. He was down there with us helping, and wow. It happens a lot. I don't know what the deal is. I'm sure God isn't trying to get us to worship material things or idolize these things.
Yeah, or turn them into icons or something like that. Yeah.
But there's definitely a message of hope that he's trying to give.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously something beyond a human explanation for that. And what else could it be other than God looking out for his word and for the cross? So,
Amen.
Anyway, great cool story. Thank you, Jeff. That's great. And that is our winnable war moment for the day. Now, where was I going from here? Oh, Jeff mentioned the book. I forgot to mention, well, I didn't know this yesterday, but I did an interview with James Dobson's Family Talk that will be airing next Monday on James Dobson's program. It's called Family Talk. If you listen to AFR, the interview will air at 6:30 a.m. Central Time. If you're listening live on AFR, 6:30 a.m. Central Time, you will hear my interview with the folks at Family Talks. That was kind of fun, and we'll allow the book to continue being the sponsor of the Read Report. Be happy to let that happen. Also, I want to remind you that we have podcasts available. If you miss the program any day, we have podcasts. Go to afr.net. Hit the podcast button, scroll down to see the Focal Point logo, and you can get podcasts. You can even go back about as far as you want to get older podcasts. So don't forget the podcast option at afr.net. You can listen to it at your convenience. All right, let's grab some sound bites. You know, and the overarching theme here, ladies and gentlemen, is that the Democrats are admitting to us they got nothing. They're admitting to us that the Mueller investigation is a dry hole. There's nothing there. He didn't find anything. In fact, the word from sources is that he's been pretty much absent from the investigation for months, that he's known for a long time now that there's nothing there, so he's handed off the pursuit of the investigation to his underlings. So he's so, I mean, Mueller is so convinced there's nothing there that he's not even involved in the investigation anymore. And the Democrats are all starting to recognize it. They're all starting to admit it, that there's nothing there. But remember, they're obsessed with getting Donald Trump. This is like, what was the thing? Was it the ring that Gollum just in the Lord of the Rings? The Precious. Yeah. This is their Precious. They will sacrifice everything for their Precious, and their Precious is to inflict lethal damage on President Donald Trump and remove him from office. This is their Precious. They are obsessed with this. They eat this. They drink this. They sleep with this. They will not rest until they remove Donald Trump from office. So they thought Mueller was going to do it for them. They thought they could read the Mueller report, walk him right into the House, get him impeached, send him over to the Senate, and get him convicted and removed from office. Not going to happen. So they got to find something else to do now, keep stirring up the muddy waters. And so they're coming up with all kind of stuff, all kind of investigations. I mean, what's his name? Jerry Nadler was out there soliciting documents from 51 or 61 or 80 different people in the Trump orbit. Now, here is Adam Schiff. He's the head of the House Intelligence Committee. Nadler's the head of the Judiciary Committee. But Adam Schiff thinks there is some potential in this Moscow Trump Tower deal. Let's listen.
The Moscow Trump Tower deal, for example, is among the most disturbing, because that's something the president was pursuing throughout the midst of the presidential campaign while saying he was having no business dealings with the Russians. We are certainly looking deep into the set of issues around Moscow Trump Tower. We're also looking at persistent allegations that the Russians have been laundering money through the Trump organization. I don't know that that's true, but if it is, again, it's a profound compromise of this president.
So if it's true,
yeah.
Well, Adam Schiff, if it's true that you have cheated on your taxes for the last 20 years, then you are a felon and should be sent to prison. If it's true. Now, I don't have any evidence that it's true, but if it's true, then you belong in prison. And also, Representative Schiff, if it's true that you went to Syria and fought alongside ISIS, if that's true, then you are a traitor and should be tried for treason and should be executed. If it's true. Now, I'm not saying it's true, but if it is, that's what ought to that's how flimsy this stuff is. And that's what's upside down and unjust and un-American about what the House Democrats are doing. Because in order to have any kind of investigation in the American system of government, you have to have some kind of concrete evidence that there's a crime here. And they are not investigating crimes, they are hunting for crimes. They're not investigating them, they're trying to invent them. Because he can't cite anything that's evidence of a crime. Now, this whole business about Trump Tower, yes, Donald Trump and his team were in negotiations with authorities in Moscow, the people that make those decisions over there, to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. You know something, ladies and gentlemen? That is not against the law. It is not against the law for an American citizen to have business talks with businessmen in Russia. It is not against the law. Banks do it. Coca-Cola does it. Pepsi-Cola does it. Beer companies do it. Vodka companies do it. It happens every day where they're in conversations, in talks with Russian authorities about doing, there's nothing illegal about that. And what President Trump did is when he got the nomination in the middle of June, he just told his team, look, we got to drop that whole Moscow Trump Tower deal. I don't have time. Because he was always very invested in any of his projects. He said, look, I got a campaign to run. He wasn't the nominee until whatever that was, June or July 16. Wasn't the nominee. But once he was the nominee, he said, look, I got to drop everything else I'm doing and give my full attention to the campaign for the presidency. So he dropped it at that point. And at that point, there were no business dealings with Russia. Not that it would have been improper or illegal if there had been, but there just weren't any. He dropped it because he had more important things to occupy his time. So again, it just shows you how flimsy and thin and make-believe all this stuff is. All right, let's go down to Gerald Nadler. This is the guy that's leading the charge on this. Clip number 6. This is George Stephanopoulos. Remember, they're beating the drums. Maxine Waters is out there again today. Got to go to impeachment. Got to impeach, impeach, impeach. And you have some junior Democrats that are out there doing the same thing, impeached. They can't talk for 2 sentences without the word impeachment showing up. Here's Nadler responding to a question from George Stephanopoulos about this.
If that's the case, then is the decision not to pursue impeachment right now simply political, if you believe he obstructed justice?
No, we have to do the investigations and get all this. We do not now have the evidence all sorted out and everything to do an impeachment. Before you impeach somebody, you have to persuade the American public that it ought to happen. You have to persuade enough of the opposition party voters or of the Trump voters that you're not just trying to.
It's a very high bar.
Yeah, it is a very high bar.
It is a very high bar. Nadler admitting they do not have the evidence they need. You know, if they did, he's been talking, oh, we've got evidence of collusion all over the place. Well, if it was actual evidence, why haven't they already started impeachment proceedings? Just trot out what you got and let's start impeaching the guy. Well, it's clear that they just don't have it. Now, let's grab clip number 7. I want to play these. Now, this is about a 1:19 clip, but this is Michael Cohen clips that prove that the whole collusion theory has been blown to smithereens. Number one, that he went to Prague and got the information that was in the Steele dossier from Russian authorities. Got it at Prague in a secret meeting. And then he was aware that there were videotapes that could be used by the Russians to blackmail Trump. And then another one is that he had colluded with the Russians during the campaign. That was another part of the Steele dossier. And then him lying to Congress. Let's listen to the clip.
You have been to Prague?
I've never been to Prague.
Never have?
I've never been to the Czech Republic.
Are you aware of anything that the president has done at home or abroad that may have subjected him to or may subject him to extortion or blackmail?
I am not, no.
Okay. Are you aware of any videotapes that may be the subject of extortion or blackmail?
I've heard about these tapes for a long time. I've had many people contact me over the years. I have no reason to believe that that tape exists.
Based on what you know, would Mr. Trump, or did he, lie about colluding and coordinating with the Russians at any point during the campaign?
So as I stated in my testimony, I wouldn't use the word colluding. Was there something odd about the back and forth praise with President Putin? Yes, but I'm not really sure that I can answer that question in terms of collusion.
You lied to those congressional committees, is that correct?
Previously?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
You stated that Trump never directed you to lie to Congress, is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, this is the whole Steele dossier, the whole Russian collusion thing up in smoke because Michael Cohen was his fixer. Michael Cohen was the guy that tried to make arrangements to pay off the porn stars that he had been accused of sleeping with. This is the guy that knows where the bodies are buried. So did you go to the Czech Republic to get the information from Russia? No, I've never even been to Prague. Never been to the Czech Republic. What about this tape that supposedly has Donald Trump cavorting on beds in Moscow with prostitutes? No, I have no reason to believe that any such tape like that even exists. If it did, he would be the one that would be out there trying to buy the silence of the people that had it. That tape doesn't exist. Did he lie about colluding with the Russians? No, never did. He didn't collude. Something odd about what he did, but being odd is not illegal in America. And my evidence of that would be the guys that I work with. Not just kidding. Don't quote me on that. And then the last thing, did Trump ever direct you to lie? Nope.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the